Welcome to another Coffee with Samso, where we speak with ASX companies and their managing directors and CEOs about the projects and their passion about what they have. Today I've got another story from the US, in Arizona. I've got Mike Bohm here from Riedel Resources, going to share with us the story about Kingman and what it's about. So, Mike? Far
thanks.
away.
Thanks very much. What do you want to know? Look, our project is in western Arizona, and I guess when people think of Arizona, they think of copper, which is certainly true. If you go down in the southeast, there's some very large, world-class copper mines down there. But Arizona's always been a mining state, and it's always had polymetallic style mineralisation. And up in the northwest corner, actually closer to Las Vegas in Nevada than in Phoenix, is an area of historic old gold, silver, lead, zinc mining. So it was quite historic. There's also a very large low-grade porphyry copper moly that's there, currently on care and maintenance. So the area is well juiced up, to use the geological term that our geologists use on site.
Look, Mike and I, we go back to the mid '90s. Yeah.
Yep.
You're much older than I am.
Oh, thank you very much.
But look, you're a mining engineer, right?
Correct.
So,
correct.
One of the things I noticed with the US projects, and I've mentioned this in my previous Coffee with Samso, because we were talking with New World Resources, is that we don't seem to hear a lot about this on the ASX. Is that just me, or is that sort of a trend?
No, look, I think it's true, but I think it will change. I used to work in Chile, and one of the team I worked with there, he was an Arizonan geologist, and he opened my eyes to the US. I personally like the southwest of the United States, so the areas around Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, they're for me the good target areas. And I think it will change. People are coming down there. I think people headed to Canada when they went to North America. They tended to go to Canada first, which is fine. And there was some challenges to the US, and challenges not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, every jurisdiction has its idiosyncrasies. But one of the things about the US is it wasn't known for being having a long historic junior mining sector like Canada and like Australia has got. Doesn't mean they don't have them, but they weren't quite as prolific. That combined with the tenure system, there's some restrictions about tenure on the size of the claim sizes and putting together contiguous claim blocks, and then the lack of use it or lose it meant that there was a lot of historic mining claims owned by people you couldn't track down. Kind of has made it hard, and still makes it hard, to put together substantial land packages. So I think that's why some other companies spent more time in places like Canada. But I think the message is getting out that the US is certainly has a lot of potential. And for me, frankly, I was quite happy that it wasn't on people's radar, because it meant I had less competition.
No, I mean, of all the ones that I've seen, and I've made this comment several times, is that I'm going, wow, this is really good. This is interesting, because and then I'm straight away into that mode of what's the issue, and why is it still here? And because it's actually, like when I looked at yours, for example, you said, oh no, let's do this, and I said, okay. I looked at it and I thought, so I put the Mike Bohm, he doesn't really hang around with stuff that doesn't work. I'm looking at the numbers, I'm going, maybe I should be taking position. And as I said to you before we started, that you guys took off, and so obviously the market likes it in some ways, and that reflects in the numbers, right?
Yeah, well, the market always likes grade, and that's what we've shown in our first round of results. In fact, it's interesting to go back to when it was a private vehicle, and we had it private for about 18 months, and we did that diamond drill program, that we got high grades. I mean, we got high grades back then. It's always been grade, and the recent RC program, where we're drilling a lot more holes, obviously, has just confirmed that it is all about grade where we are. We're not chasing a large tonnage world-class ore body here. That's not what we're after. We're after the small to medium scale but very high grade opportunities that can be can be, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, both from an open pit and underground perspective. So, it is what it is.
I like to find or share with what you told me about maybe the journey of how you guys got this project, and because I think there's interest in that and how you were able to get it and how it developed over time. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I worked in Chile for a number of years, and part of the team we had there were mostly Chilean geologists, but we had one American geologist, Bill Firerobin, who's a good friend of mine now. And he's been based in Arizona for many years. He's a very, very experienced exploration geo in his early 70s, so he spent 50 years in the Americas. And he and I have been doing stuff on and off for a little while now. We did something in Utah about 4 years ago. I remember he and I were staking claims, as they call it in the US. I've got used to not saying pegging tenements, but staking claims, and the US, you have to go and whack the wooden peg in the ground, as you know. Yeah. So we've been looking at opportunities for a while, and it's about kissing frogs, Noel. The first project that comes along isn't necessarily the best one, and you really have to go and do a lot of DD and take time. So Bill identified this going back almost 3 years ago now, and so we did our due diligence, went over there, liked what we saw. And then we almost missed out because there was another company they were talking to, and I was about to jump on the plane and go over there. And I rang them and I said, look, I don't mean to be unkind, but don't let me spend all this money getting on a plane and come there and then tell me that you've done a deal with someone else. So, be upfront with me. And they said, oh, actually, now that you ask, we're talking to someone else as well, and it's further advanced. So I said, look, I was obviously really disappointed, but I said, why don't you just see how that goes and come back to me? And about 6 weeks later, I got a phone call out of the blue. And they said, well, the other party's fallen away. So I literally jumped on a plane the next day. I flew to...
Can't do that now.
No, can't do it now. I flew to... I'm not so happy about that, but my wife and family are quite happy to see me more often. But I flew over there. I've got to know El Paso, Texas a lot better than I ever thought I would, because the vendors are based in Texas. But we went over there, and it's funny you should mention that, the opportunities there, and when you looked at it, you were surprised to see this. Why hasn't this sort of stuff been found before? And we found it really interesting. When I went to site the first time, and the geologist told me that it had never been drilled, but I could see, a shafts, an old historic processing plant with a bit of tailings on the ground, outcropping mineralisation, and they told me it hadn't been drilled. I didn't believe them. I went around looking for drill collars, historic drill collars that I could find. And indeed, it had only ever been drilled at Tintic with a very small 200 metre strike extent. So, yeah, we went over there, took a couple of trips, then we started to negotiate the deal, because then you go from technical to legal, of course, and you have to satisfy yourself that everything's in order. The counterparties are lovely people. They're not mining people, but we've built a relationship with them. They like the fact that we pay our bills on time and do all that.
That's always a good thing.
It's always a good thing, as part of the agreement we have. So yeah, that's how it came about. And then we privately spent about $1.5 million Australian dollars. We did surface geology work. We did some...
This is prior to going to Riedel.
Correct. So this was all prior to going to Riedel. So we did some geophysics, and geophysics works really well. And it's not lost on me, Noel, the irony that I've spent, I guess, 25, 30 years of my career, that when people put up geophysical maps and plans, I can sometimes have my eyes glaze over. And the fact that I now use it because it's a really powerful tool in what we're doing, particularly because our geology is very near surface. But we did that. Off the back of that, we actually staked more ground and expanded the footprint. In fact, we tripled the size of the footprint of the project. And then we did the diamond program. And we got those great results in December, January. And January last year, I jumped on a plane. I was actually on vacation with the family overseas, and I went straight to Vancouver for Roundup. Then I came back for a few weeks and went back for PDAC in Toronto. And we were looking to, still privately, take this further and what we might do with it. We were talking to a couple of producers in North America about the opportunity, because they liked the grade and the fact that almost no work had been done. And then COVID hit, and that kind of set us all back a few months, set everyone back in a lot of areas. So we just looked at where we might go with it, and looking at the opportunity to take it to market. Riedel presented that opportunity, so we did it, and we were really fortunate because we had done that drill program back in late 2019. We're only a small company, but we've got a team of geos in the US, so we've got access to 4 geologists, including Bill, my partner. We've got drilling companies we've used. We've got an office in Kingman. We've got a storage facility in Kingman. We know where to put our people. We know where to get water. And the other important thing is, because we're all locals, the only foreigner at all is me. We've been able to build a local relationship with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management. So we've been really fortunate, and it's also helped that we've done what we said we would do. So we went in, we put our applications in for a notice of intent. We paid our bonds, we drilled our holes, we rehabilitated immediately. They weren't inspected. They were very happy with that outcome. So when it came to the next program, which is the one that we're currently drilling, it's gone, knock on wood, a bit like clockwork, because we just had to start the team back up, get Bort Longyear in, who are, I think, the world's largest drilling company. They're very good at what they do, very good systems and procedures, very good safety protocols, because we like to run this like we're running, a Ramelius or a Mincor, or, we're only a junior, but we like to bring that attention to detail to start with, because we plan for success in the long term. So everything we do, we like to think that is setting ourselves up for long-term success.
I mean, when I look at this project, and hearing what you talk about, you walked up there, there's shafts, but there's no drilling and all this kind of thing. Does it it does bring me back to maybe, what it was like in the goldfields maybe, 20, 30 years ago, maybe 40 years, and to some respect, I mean, this is those small shows that you hear people have been working on for the last 20 years, and if they had a bigger company, they could have made more, but they were doing well, doing their own little thing, right?
Yep.
Because it's narrow vein. I mean, there's a big difference between narrow vein, high grade. It still works. Then you got the big volume stuff that gets all the limelight and the millions of tons. But the guy that's got 60,000 tons at 10 grams or whatever, it's actually doing well, right?
Yep.
And my always go to is Silver Lake, because that's my first sort of foray into this part of the industry. Is that they're narrow vein, they're very high grade, and if you do it well, you do it for decades.
Yep, correct. And look, it's interesting. It's glib to say that grade is king, but grade's really important. I mean, we often talk about the fact that if this had been in the goldfields, this would have been drilled in the 70s and 80s. And Noel, I moved to Kalgoorlie in 1981 to study mining engineering in the School of Mines in Cal, and I remember back in the day, so we're talking 1981, 82. That we used to, on the weekends, ride our motorbikes over what is now the super pit. That was it was a different time. It was a different era. And if our project, our Kingman project, had been in Western Australia, it would have been drilled 30 years ago. I have no doubt. But the circumstances means what it is. But just going back to grade, I like to also say to people that when I moved to Kalgoorlie in the early 80s, there was a company called Mitchell Cotts that used to build gold processing plants, sort of off-the-shelf gold processing plants. And the standard size was 250,000 tonne per annum. That was the size, and it was because a lot of the open pits were 3, 4, 5, 6 grams per tonne. Now, because a lot of people are now milling 1 gram a tonne, you have to have volume. It's all about scale. So in sort of 30, 40 years, we've moved up the scale size because people are chasing lower and lower grade. I mean, the grade will be what the grade will be, but we're not chasing 1 or 2 gram dirt. If it's there and we end up mining it, we'll take it. But that's not our target. Our target is that high grade, and it's polymetallic. It's still early days in our journey, but in addition to the gold, we know we've got high grade silver there. We've seen that from the results. We do have lead zinc because the whole area there is quite geologically complex, and there's at least 2 mineralising events that we've seen through there. And I know when a mining engineer talks geology, you have to take a grain of salt, but we do like the fact that we're seeing structural complexity there, geological complexity, high grade, polymetallic. The fact it's near surface is a good thing as well. That helps us. And for us, that all builds a picture that, you know, it's not boring rocks we have there. We have quite exciting geology.
Because a lot of the stuff over there are polymetallic, and it's historically been gold, silver was the term. Every time you see a think about the US, it's about gold, silver, and silver seems to come up, and silver is very big in Mexico. Everything is silver, right? Can you just share some light on that? What does it take to be excited about a silver deposit?
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer what it takes to be excited, because our project's not a silver project. It's gold, silver, with hopefully some zinc, lead credits, and we're chasing the gold component. But you can't ignore the silver grades we've got, because they are quite high. Yep. You're right about silver not being that well known here, and it's interesting in Australia. There's not a long track record or historical record of lots of silver mines. When you come to Western Australia and, you know, Queensland, and there's gold, lots of gold, and you know, a long historic success story with gold. You don't see that with silver, so you don't see many silver stories on the ASX, so investors don't get that exposure. You move to North America, be it Mexico, be it the US, be it Canada, and
everything's silver.
People know silver.
Yeah.
It doesn't come as a surprise to anyone.
Yeah.
Often associated with either gold or lead zinc, but it's quite well known. And you know, the mineralisation, for example, Arizona borders Mexico, so geology doesn't worry about borders. The rocks just keep going across the border.
That's right.
So you know, Mexico's got a very long and historic gold and silver culture, I guess. And the same with parts of the US. Silver is very, very common in that part of the world. To get excited, high grade.
Yeah. I know, when I look at the numbers, I always wonder, because I mean, look, the funny thing you mentioned about silver not being common in West Australia, is that I didn't even realise McPherson Reward, when they had that silver deposit right out of, well, not literally right out, but next door to Kalgoorlie. I didn't even realise it was there.
Yep.
Due to, you know, the fact that I'm not sort of knowledgeable about the whole area, but the fact that it's there, and it surprised me, and it's been the only one that's been marketed around ever since, right?
Yep.
But so when I look at silver grades, you know, 300 grams, and then someone will quote 10 grams, and then you try and figure out how much silver is, and it's like a...
Look, I'm always really cautious about doing metal equivalents, and there are guidelines to what you're allowed to do in terms of metal, whether it's gold equivalent, silver equivalent, zinc equivalent, nickel equivalent. So there are guidelines there. I tend to take a simplistic view when I'm looking at things sort of on face value. Is I just do the comparison between the prices. Now that assumes, of course, that you get the same metallurgy and the same recovery, which isn't a fact. But you know, I think roughly at the moment, I think it's about 60 to 1 the comparison. So I tend to, and it varies. It's been down to 50. It's been up to 100 between silver and gold. So if I see a silver grade, I tend to, and again, also you've got to be looking at what tonnage it is, because if you've got something that's large tonnage, obviously you can chase lower grades. But I tend to sort of divide it by 60. So if I see 60 silver, I say, oh, that's about a gram a tonne gold. It's not, but it's a little rule of thumb that I use.
Yeah.
So if you've got 300 silver, about 5 grams a tonne gold. Again, that's just a rule of thumb, and it changes as the commodity prices change. So don't quote me.
Well, you quoted.
I'm quoted, but with all the caveats that it's a rough rule of thumb.
Yeah. I mean, when I did a Samso Insight, I wrote about porphyries and I sort of got into the porphyries in Chiles and how big they are, and then you talk about, and then you start looking at where they are. I mean, where Arizona is and that part of the US, you're on the same sort of volcanic zone as
it's
all
a porphyry
these,
belt.
right? Porphyry belt and everything else. So it should not come as a surprise that you guys are getting this. But what is surprising is that the attention, or the lack of attention there, is remarkable compared to the rest of this zone. Like everyone talks about Indonesia, the Philippines, the South America, and all this, but there's not much coming out of the US, which
Yeah, look, and I do. I think that'll change. There are reasons for it. I mean, I love the US. I used to live there many years ago, 30 years ago, and it's a great jurisdiction to do business in. Like anywhere in the world, it has its idiosyncrasies. Australia's a great jurisdiction for mining, but you need you have your issues. The tenure system is I won't say complex, but it throws up some issues. You can't, and I'm being a bit broad sweeping here, but you can't interrogate land tenure in real time, which can be done here in Canada and a few other places. So that creates some challenges. There's also plenty of areas where you can't stake claims, not because they're taken by someone else, but they're barred to mineral entry, so they're not open to be staked. So you've got to get to know the lie of the land, if you like. The other issue with it is because of the lack of use it or lose it, there are a lot of claims that haven't died, for want of a better word. That if you pay your $165 to the authorities, your claim gets renewed every year. And these claims are very small. We're talking 1,500 feet by 600 feet.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking 480 metres by 180 metres. So you can have and sometimes if you go and see, there's historic maps, and they're like a patchwork, a quilt of hundreds of claims, and they can be owned by hundreds of different people. So, and deceased estates, inherited by people. And so pulling them all together and tying them all together into a contiguous land package can be quite hard. And that's where we were really lucky, because the gentleman out of Texas that pulled them all together originally, he staked them as a contiguous package. We then went and extended them. And we were lucky because it was under shallow cover. And you've got to remember that the old timers, well, certainly where we were, mining back in the 1880s through to 1940s, they weren't mining companies. They were prospectors, like we had on the goldfields. So they were mining to make money to put food on the table in many cases. So they really only chased that which they could see. So they didn't drill holes, they didn't explore, they followed veins. And if they made money, they kept following them. And that expanded, and if they were successful, and they would have people come and bring capital in, not necessarily miners, but people with money would come and invest money to build processing plants and tailings dams like the little one, the historic one that was on site. So that's how they evolved. Now, probably 80% roughly of our tenure has some, let's call it superficial cover. It's quite shallow, but it meant that people couldn't see the mineralisation underneath, so they didn't look. And so the modern techniques of geophysics that we have and drilling just didn't get carried out. So those, but it's hard for a company to get on the ground, particularly if you're a large-scale miner who's looking for big projects. You look at these things and you go, well, I can't get on the ground. It's hard to get on the ground. It's harder to put together bigger land packages, and not impossible, but harder. And so that's a barrier to entry, if you like. And we were fortunate where we had quite a chunky land package already there, which is what we dealt on. And then we were fortunate that because the rest was undercover, it hadn't been staked. So we were able to go and stake and expand the claim.
Oh, it definitely looks really interesting. I mean, going forward, from Riedel's point of view, what's the sort of the 12-month, 18-month sort of, if someone said, hey, I love this story, I'm going to get into the stock, what's the value that they would be thinking of?
Oh, look, I guess, how long is a piece of string? We're planning for success. I mean, the thing that we like about it is, number one, the geology. I know that sounds strange for a mining engineer to say, but the geological setting is right. And then we didn't have to go and find the high grade. Someone else found it for us. I mean, the old timers, they were quite talented, and they found it for us. So the geology looks great. The grade looks great, if I may say so. And we believe we've only scratched the surface. I mean, our tenure is about 5 kilometres long by roughly 2.5 kilometres wide. And that geophysics we did, which covers the whole property, has just identified that we believe that it's all prospective. Now, you'd expect me to say that, but what we're seeing with the drilling is that we think that the contact with the gabbro, and the gabbro we see really clearly in the geophysics, is all prospective, and we're drilling these holes and we're hitting mineralisation. So we think that the world's our oyster there, because so little work has been done, even by us. And if you think of kilometres of strike length, you think of the fact that not only do these things outcrop, because we've seen where the old timers with the shafts outcrop, but the shaft at Arizona-magma goes to 500 feet, which is not super deep, but it was deep for the day. It meant that they had confidence to chase it down that deep. What's that, 500 feet, 150, 160 metres? Mm. But regionally, if you look just to the east of our project, a couple of miles to the east is the old Tennessee Skulking Mine. We call it the Tennessee Mine, and that was essentially a lead zinc mine with silver credits, or zinc lead with silver credits and a bit of gold. That went to 1,400 feet, and the technology of the day, pumping wasn't what it is today, but they took it all the way to 1,400 feet. So we're talking nearly 500 metres. So for us, what we like about it is it's got strike potential, multiple veins, polymetallic, outcrops in many cases, which means you can have an open pit view of the world to start with, and then move to underground if you have future success. And as a mining engineer, I don't care if it's open pit or underground. Arm waving, if we drill it and we get a resource and we do a feasibility study and we get a reserve and we can finance it, we can permit it, and we can get it away. So, but the beauty that we see is that we see short-term potential, but we see medium and long-term potential, because the mineralisation in this part of the world has been seen to go to depth. Now our drilling, the deepest hole we've drilled is probably 150 metres, but in itself that's not a bad depth. So yeah, we see a real future for this, and because we're talking about grade and hence not volume, we're not looking at a situation where we're looking to have a 5 million tonne per annum plant. We could never feed it. So we're not looking at capital costs that people throw around of 200-300 million. If we're lucky enough to get the results we need to ever contemplate it, there is small scale plants. They're modular. You build them, buy them off the shelf. There's plenty of companies that build them. They're in sea containers. You bolt them together and away you go. Now there's a lot of work to be done to get to that point, but if you get high grade near surface, it doesn't take much of a stretch of the imagination to think how you might take that through into potentially a mining phase at some point in time.
Does this have potential to be a VMS province?
Look, I don't know. And again, province, province in terms of scale, always I start to get arm waving where I get uncomfortable about that. We think we've got a dominant land position there, and that's a good thing. And we built that up because we were private. We could do it quietly. I should digress and talk about the land position. We had the 70 claims which we did the original deal on, and we did some quite simple, cost-effective ground geophysics work, and the results were fabulous. I mean, they really leapt out at us, notwithstanding my earlier comment about geophysics, what does it all mean? And it showed clearly that the structure we were targeting shot off to the south of the property, and we knew that it wasn't staked. And it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning and I'm ringing the guys in the States going, get out of bed, get in a vehicle, go and stake those claims, go and take I'm being flippant now. We did it over a matter of 2 or 3 weeks because we didn't think anyone else was going to go and take it. Yeah. But therein was another example of being nimble. Province, early days. I mean, this area has been mined over a strike extent of, I'm going to say, 20-30 kilometres, because obviously we're at what we believe is the northern end. Then you've got the Mineral Park, and you can see it on Google Earth, the big low-grade copper moly that's Mineral Park, which is a porphyry. It's on care and maintenance, and that's a couple of miles away. And then to the south of that, there was more historic small-scale mining, mostly for zinc and lead, but also there was, it's polymetallic, so there's mineralisation there. I mean, we'll look for opportunities around. The thing that we feel comfortable with is that we think we're, because we've now got a really significant land position, and obviously the Mineral Park mine, that's a different beast. That's a very large, low grade, and they've got a very large footprint, so that's kind of taken there. But yeah, as we look to move forward, and there are some old historic, much smaller mines to the east of us, we think we would be the ideal partner to team up with these people, because we have, a significant land position there. So okay. We've been there for some time now, and we've got a critical mass. So we'll, as we move ahead in the future, and I'm arm waving now, we'd look to see what opportunities lie out there. But the issue for us is our own property, our own 5 kilometres by 2.5 kilometres, is so underexplored that we don't need to step off just right now, because we need to go and keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah. So going for, look, Kundana was a small little vein, right? And they've 20 years, 30 years now. So look, going forward, what's the news flow for guys out there?
Good question. Everyone loves news flow.
Yeah. Especially these guys.
And I get it. It's funny, quarterly reports are long-term planning.
Yeah. I like that.
These days. News flow. Well, we're still drilling, as you know. We'll finish that shortly. I think the guys are taking a break for Easter, but we'll be back drilling early next week to finish off the last few holes. We've got a handful of holes left to do. So the first results were last week. We've told the market that the next batch of results will be in April, which is tomorrow.
Next week? Oh yeah.
It won't be tomorrow,
yeah.
But it'll be in April, and that's what we've told the market. And the final batch of results will be in May. We've been really fortunate. We've got a great drilling contractor doing the work for us. Assay laboratory turnaround is really slow, and that's not a criticism, that's just an observation. There's a fair amount of work going on in the US, so the labs are busy, and COVID has meant it's created some restrictions on how they do things, so everything's slowed down, and that's life, and we just have to put up with that. So we're banking on April and May, which is, as I said, what we've told the market. That there might be a trickle effect through to June. This last batch of drilling, if we get it done next week and we get the samples off to the assay lab sort of mid-April, we might get the results back for 6 weeks. I mean, we were once quoted 1 to 3 weeks. One of the labs quoted us 3 months. We were quoted 1 to 3 weeks, and I think turnaround at the moment it's about 4.5 weeks. The curious thing, which is always a good thing, that when you get over limits, and as you know, if you put an assay in for a certain style of assay technique, if the grade's too high, you have to send it back for a different type of assaying, and that's called over limits. So that actually delays it by a few days. And that was one of the things that happened last time. We were delayed because we got over limits. And as I said to the team in the US, I'll be happy to be delayed by over limits
anytime,
any day of the week. But no, April and May, maybe with a few from the last handful of holes trickling into June. So a good solid news flow coming over the next few months.
You should just let the ASX know that you're SS delayed because of over limits.
Yeah, it's normally only a matter of days,
it only needs a day of trading for most of these guys.
Yeah, people get excited. Look, as you know, we're in there for the long haul.
Yeah.
Our goal is to take this as far as we can take it with to get good results, get low hanging fruit. But at the end of the day, it's about adding value to shareholders, whether that's doing more exploration and finding high grade, getting a resource, or doing a feasibility study, or taking it further with someone else. We'll look at that as the opportunities present themselves. But in the short term, we see lots of opportunity for identifying not only high grade near surface, but also identifying opportunity for expanding and building on that.
All right, yeah, look, great story. I mean, I loved it. As I said to you when I first saw it, it's structurally great. Sometimes, you can see it and then you think, yeah, that's a good story, because at this point it is a story.
Yep.
Until, as you say,
it's early days.
You develop the thing. But look, guys, I really encourage you to reach out to Mike and ask questions, because it's a developing story, and it's still a great story. I think. I don't think it's very expensive to get into the stock, and definitely reach out and subscribe to us and do all the YouTube things that you guys should be doing for me.
And Noel, can I jump in and say, yes, absolutely you should subscribe, but also I'm always happy to engage with shareholders. So feel free to reach out. It's part of my job is to talk to shareholders and explain what we're doing. Because sometimes you'll say something in an ASX announcement and the message doesn't get across, and we all know how the market can sometimes some of the chat sites can get a bit carried away with themselves. Just come back and ask.
No, that's great. Look, I do put Mike at a different level where I think I've known him for a long time. I know how he works. I know how he doesn't work. And I really encourage you guys to reach out, because it's a good story. But anyway, look, Mike, thanks for giving us time.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Noel.
that.
No,
and,
it was good to come in.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can continue the journey, and you can give us exclusive to all your announcements.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Only good announcements, I've got to...
Well, we wish for only good announcements.
Yeah. All right, look, thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Noel. Terrific, thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in.